final chapter of interpersonal success probably isn't going to come as a surprise. It's probably the part that you're all dreading, because we are going to talk about how to have difficult conversations. Now, they are referred to in a lot of settings as difficult conversations, or you might hear them courageous conversations. Personally, I refer to them as awkward conversations because in my experience, 95% of conversations that are framed as difficult aren't really that difficult. They're just awkward. And that most of the stress happens in the sleepless nights stressing about having the conversation. Once you're in the conversation, it's very rarely only takes 6 minutes and then it's done. And you're like, oh, okay, I stressed about that for 6 months. That doesn't seem a bit anticlimactic. So I refer to them as awkward conversations, whichever terminology you use. The point is we need to be having them if we're going to have good constructive workplaces. It is a myth that you shouldn't have conflict in your workplace. Okay, I do culture audits quite regularly for teams. And yeah, okay, sure. If I walk into a team where everybody's swearing at each other and, gossiping and nastiness, it's really clear that something's wrong here. But walking in and everybody being super harmonious, like it's something out of like Stepford Wives, sort of weird dystopian, emotionless, yeah, we all get along really well here. That's a big red flag too, okay? Because if people don't have the courage and the empowerment and the skills to have a difficult conversation constructively, you never move forward as a team. So it both is a little bit of a symptom of a poor psychological safety culture, but also you're kind of stuck in the status quo because if nobody's safe enough to challenge it, you just stay. So awkward conversations are a necessary part of a really great workplace, okay? And that, again, like so much else, is something you can just sit and hope that other people do for you and that your boss fixes. Or someone with a high level of emotional intelligence could have realized that they can contribute to this and that they have a role to play in making this better around here. So the key points before we get into it is A, you won't like everybody you work with. You do need to check, is this just a likability issue? Are we just not compatible? But actually nothing they do is wrong. It's just that our manuals don't match, but nothing that they're doing is wrong or unprofessional. Check first, okay? Because often so many things that somebody sees as a totally inappropriate thing in a workplace is not that inappropriate. It's just not in your manual. So check in with yourself, check in with your manager, because we're not going to gossip about it with other people, obviously. Check in. Oh, this thing that this person does is irking me. Like, can we bounce off with this is a reasonable, justifiable kind of irk? All right. The second thing that you need to check in with yourself, remind you that they are not doing whatever they are doing just to annoy you or upset you or undermine you. All right. We have this tendency to jump to a conclusion that, oh, that person stole my client because they're trying to undermine me, or they said that thing because they just want to get under my skin. Frankly, the honest truth is they probably weren't thinking about you at all. Okay. But the really, really important truth here is that most people are trying to do the right thing and to do a good job. Their manual on what that looks like could be different to yours. And sometimes, no matter what our manual says, sometimes we all fail at what we intended to do. It doesn't mean that they're a bad person or that they're out to get you. So make sure you're coming to any decision about a difficult conversation with the realization that it's very, very unlikely that their intent is to be harmful. Remember I said that awkward conversations are usually more awkward than difficult. It is also true that sitting with that level of awkwardness over an extended period of time because you don't have the conversation is usually much more awkward than having the awkward conversation. All right. So most of us spend a vast, like 90% of the energy related to one of these conversations is spent before having it. So if you just decide that one needs having, just decide and do it that day or the next day, you're going to cut out 90% of the angst related to how frustrating these are. All right, because it's the dwelling and the stressing and the should I and the shouldn't I and the how am I going to say it and what am I going to say and the writer script, and that is where it gets all very frustrating. So it is more energy to let the thing constantly be a niggling annoyance and never raise it than to just get the 10 minutes out of the way, okay? Because remember, the most successful teams have conflict, have people who will challenge the status quo, who will ask hard questions. Because how else are you going to understand anybody else's manual if you don't ask them about it? The how-to, key tips. I mean, obviously, how to have a difficult conversation is very regularly a half day or a full day course, but in the quick snippet version of it, firstly, you should try to resolve any interpersonal conflict yourself first if you can. All right, there are exceptions to this, such as when, there is there's actual bullying or, genuine victimization behaviors, or you feel genuinely psychologically unsafe. Of course, you should be getting support with that. But when we're talking about something that somebody does that annoys you, or something that somebody said that didn't feel right with you, as soon as you escalate that to your manager, it's a thing now. It's a drama now, both for you, for your boss, and for the other person. And it's very hard to just have a 6-minute awkward conversation and everybody moves on and kind of forgets it happened by the next day. As soon as it's a thing, it's a thing. So wherever you can, raise things yourself. Sure, talk to your supervisor or your manager beforehand to, bounce your ideas on how you're going to do it. But try really hard to take responsibility for being part of these solutions. Key point, do not do it via message or email or text or Facebook. Please, God, just have it face to face. Unless you are in a pretty rare scenario whereby you work from home independently and you are never in contact with these people, in which case a Zoom meeting might be okay, do it face to face. I have a lot of people who push back to that, saying, I'm not confident enough and I'll stumble over my words and I'll cry. I'm a frustrated crier. I totally relate to the fact that when a conversation's not going how I wanted it to, I will burst into tears. So I do sympathize, okay? But remember that emotional intelligence and that interpersonal emotional intelligence is hugely reliant on the ability to amend your body language and your tone, and hugely reliant on your capacity to read the body language and the tone and the nonverbal things that the other person is saying. So if you're trying to be highly emotionally intelligent and you're doing that via email, you've lost 80% of your skill. And so the other person sitting on the other end of this has got nothing to go off when they are putting it through their bubble or their shark music switches on. The only thing they have to read is words on a page, which will probably be combined with some previously unpleasant shark music, or at least their own bubble sense of defensiveness or previous rejections or their sensitivities to failure. And that's all they've got to apply to your words on a page. Whereas when we are there face to face, we can have a two-way conversation with them and what's going on in their bubble because you're paying attention to them. Please, if there's only one principle you take out of all of this, do it face to face, okay? The next one is more controversial as well, all right? Don't go in prepared with a speech. Pretty common amateur suggestions for how to do something you're scared of is to write out a script first and practice it in front of the mirror and then go in and say it. And I do understand the appeal of that because when we're stressed, we're flustered, we fumble over our words, we forgot that we wanted to say that thing, and then we come out going, oh my God, I didn't say that, or I missed the whole point. Or they make you cry because the thing went all off track and now you're really upset. I do understand the appeal of a script, okay? The challenge with having a script is that you're going in prepared with all of the things you want to say, and you cannot help but prioritize all of the things you wanted to say instead of listening. And then we fall in that trap of not really listening to their responses. We're just waiting to speak to see the next thing on our script. And the other trap related to having your script, and these are the things I want to say, is that if the conversation goes any direction that's different to how you anticipated their, very apologetic responses, then you're going to end incredibly frustrated by the outcome because you only ever had one outcome in one direction for the conversation in your mind. And you didn't leave space for the fact that there are lots of different ways that this could still be resolved positively. So if you are somebody that is nervous about fumbling over words or want to make sure that you do clearly get to articulate the things that are important to you, max 4 bullet points. You can go in with your 4 bullet point questions, and they should be questions, not statements, okay? And I'll show you in a second how to structure that and where they should come in. But do not have this is what I want to say, this is how I want to say it, this is what I'm going to say when they say this, all right? Because it won't do what the next point is, which is make sure that you're going in there to understand what's happening and what you can do to move forward rather than deciding what you want to say, okay? So, key principles in mind. You're in a good headspace, you're calm, you're open-minded to their ideas, you're genuinely open to the fact that their manual might be different to yours, but it's as equally right as yours, and that they're going to interpret how this goes through a bubble, and that you're going to interpret their responses through a bubble. You've got the right headspace. You're going to go in, and I want you to say the specific situation. Okay, so this is what happened. Then you're going to say, I felt. So here's how I felt about the thing. Now you're going to ask for their perspective of it. So, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. Or is that your same interpretation of the situation? Or have you felt this way? Or do you see where I'm coming from? Or what do you think that we could do to move forward together? Okay, because it's not until we get to that stage where you are inviting and listening and genuinely engaging in a two-way conversation that you can move to the final step, which is make a plan for how you're going to make sure it doesn't happen again. Okay, so the specific situation, key tips. As soon as you have used the words always, never, everybody or nobody, you're setting yourself up for failure, okay? Because if you say you're always late, they're just going to, oh, well, no, I was on time last Thursday. Or you always speak over me. Well, no, I don't. I didn't say anything when you were talking this morning. Okay, so as soon as you're dealing in absolutes, you're setting yourself up for the fact that they're just going to rebut you and now the conversation's kind of gone all off track already, but also you're probably not being truthful, okay? There's very few people that are always or never something, or everybody thinks, or nobody likes this process, all right? So I want you to make sure that you're really specific. 3 times last week you were late, or on Tuesday during the meeting you said this, or you have on 3 different occasions now rolled your eyes when I was speaking, including in this morning's meeting. Okay, so specific, objective things. This is what happened, right? That neither of you can kind of debate. The I felt piece. Now, this is an interesting one because some recommendations are about like take the feelings out of it. Don't do that. The reason that I felt is a much more powerful way to move forward than just be super objective and don't bring your feelings into it, is because you're giving them room for the fact that you both have different manuals and you've both got different bubbles and you're interpreting differently. So if you go in there and say, yesterday you said this thing to me and it was condescending, what are you going to do about it? It's a very different conversation than yesterday you said this thing and I felt condescended to. Do you have a perspective on that? So when you are saying this is what happened and therefore this is what you did, there's a lot of very high likelihood that you're assuming an intent that may or may not have been there, and you're failing to recognize what your bubble did to it. Again, remember, that doesn't mean that what they did was okay just because your bubble took it one way, but it does mean that you've skipped a whole step in the solutions to this, all right? So the specific objective scenario and how it made you feel. So I felt condescended to. Or, you keep being late to meetings with me and it makes me feel like you don't respect my time. Or I've come in, on time and the place has still been a mess from last night when you hadn't cleaned it. And it has made me feel like I have to work harder to make up for you not finishing your job. All right. So how you feel does matter because it leaves room for them to save some face, but mostly it leaves room for the fact that you are both human beings. So the next part is about their perspective. Now, it won't come as any surprise that I'm going to say, actually, listen, this is where so many conversations fall down because you're so determined that you know their ill intent and that you know that they were just doing it to be a twit and that they don't care at all about the real world. And sometimes the first response you get from them is like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that I was doing it. But sometimes it's more nuanced. Sometimes it's, oh yeah, I have noticed that I sometimes nitpick some of the stuff that you do. I have felt like sometimes I have to pick up the slack because you don't finish on time and therefore I never get to leave on time. Can we talk about that? So actually now you're like, oh, well, now I have to have a conversation. This person also has input into this scenario. Okay. And that is why you have to be prepared for that genuine curiosity. All right. And then once you've listened to each other with genuine curiosity, now you make a plan together. What are you going to do? And make sure that you check in before you leave the room. Check in. When are we going to talk about this again? Because if you go out of the room and they keep doing the thing, you will never have the balls to raise it for a second time. And now that's when you're going to escalate it to your manager. Whereas if you'd be like, okay, cool, should we try this for a month and we'll go out for coffee next, Friday, second Friday of the month and talk how it's going, put it in the diary. Okay, then nobody is awkward about the fact that they have to raise it again. So part of your plan should be a check-in, all right? Another key point to take away, anything that you say that is followed by the word but, you may as well have not said, okay? So, think all due respect, but, or no offense, but, we all know that that's kind of laughable. But when you also say, oh, I'm really sorry, but, or, I didn't mean it that way, but, you are effectively negating what you said. Right. Now, we can hold space for two things to be true at once, which is, yes, you're right that I did that thing. And here's some things that I'd love to discuss about how it happened and how we can move forward together. Those two things can be true. But I'm using but appropriately in this scenario. Okay. I really want you to think about the impact of somebody coming to you and saying, this thing you did last week hurt my feelings. And you go, oh, I'm really sorry, but I only did it because I was running really late. All right. Instead, I want you to think about how you have two separate conversations. And one of those conversations is just a flat out apology. Because remember, you can talk about your intent or the why behind what happened, because that's the best way to get to a solution, right? But if they have said that something that you said went through their bubble and hurt their feelings, you don't have to make an excuse for that. You shouldn't make an excuse for that. So rather than, I'm sorry, but I was only doing it because I was stressed, or, I'm sorry I called you out on that thing, but it's because you never are running on time. You actually just need to stop and separate those two conversations. Somebody says to you, this thing you said or this thing you did frustrates me or hurts my feelings. You simply say, I'm sorry. End of. Because if you say I'm sorry, but you may as well have not said I'm sorry. So I am sorry. Would you like to talk about what's happening and why we're having this situation? And now you can start talking about, I'm feeling frustrated when you're never running on time, and so I have to pick up the slack, and that's maybe why I got a bit snappy or a bit micromanagey. Right? But they need to be two different conversations. Because remember, the below the line is blame, denial, and excuses. As soon as you're like, sorry, but, that's effectively below the line. So you are sorry. Whether you intended to hurt their feelings or not doesn't matter, and you don't need to justify. You just need to say, your feelings got hurt because your bubble is important and your manual is valid. I'm sorry. Let's talk through what was happening for both of us so we can work through a solution. It's hard, hey? Because gosh, do we want to justify ourselves? All right. What about your managers? What about having difficult conversations with your managers when it's them that's the problem, or just they've done something that frustrates you or upset you, or a policy you don't like, or you wanted them to do better at the culture, or they say inappropriate things? All right. Frankly, it's exactly the same. Your managers are just people too, all right? With all the same flaws, all the same nuances, all of the same chinks in their bubble. Slightly different manuals because they've got all of these things and these priorities coming from other people, but they're just people too. So take all of the same stuff, all right? And if you're not going into that conversation with genuine curiosity and genuine openness to an outcome that you might not have thought yet, you're just going to be disappointed by the outcome. So how often do we go in like, oh, we need this new piece of equipment, as opposed to we're falling behind on our dentals, best practice. I can see that a dental x-ray is going to improve our capacity to do better quality care. I'd like to talk about that. Then they might turn around and say, well, that's not a solution because, or yeah, sure, which one do you want? Or they might turn around and say, what's the middle ground? Okay, so we've got some challenges with, you don't think the dentals are best practice. Who could we partnership to work through that? What could we do? What training can we get in? What are we going to do that could mean that we're having a genuine two-way conversation rather than you going in with a demand? Because A, they just have to find emotional energy to engage in that. And B, you're going to be disappointed if their outcome is slightly different to yours. And the best possible way to get an outcome that you want or a solution that you want from your boss is to not ask them to do it. Okay? Because just like you, their list of priorities is a millionfold long. And if giving things to them and them not doing it causes you frustration, as it does for most of us, stop giving it to them. Go in with it. Hey, this policy is frustrating me and a couple of other staff members. We were wondering if we could start a working group and draft a proposed solution for you. Expect that if you want something on someone else's to-do list, because it's important to you, that you need to be the person who decides to step up and fix that problem. Okay? Now I'm going to do one final exercise in this space just because I think it's still very easy to make it kind of theoretical and, oh, yeah, well, it's all good and well to say we should have difficult conversations, but they're hard and awkward and that person is mean and they mean it badly and it shouldn't be on my responsibility to have this conversation. So I'm going to give you two different scenarios. And in these scenarios, you're basically just going to get both perspectives. All right. So for those playing along audio, I'll read them out. For those of you who have some visuals, feel free. But scenario one, okay? You've gathered the courage to talk to a colleague about the fact that you feel that they pick on you. They seem to always be telling you what to do, asking why you're there, where you are, and checking on things, whether they got done. They don't seem to do this to others, and you feel like it's bordering on being a bully. So, as a way to, I guess, bring some of that together around challenging your assumptions that there's only one side to a story, challenging the fact that what we intended is the same as how it lands, challenge the assumption that it's the other person's job to do better, not on us, and really hoping to drive home the message that not having a difficult conversation is much more difficult than having it. I want to talk you through two different scenarios, and both of these are real life scenarios that I have been involved in facilitating the conversation that really simply could have been immediately fixed with a conversation. So I want to talk you through, and I'm going to read you one perspective and then the other. It's not going to come as a surprise that maybe it's not as simple as it seems. All right. But scenario one, for those listening along to audio, I'll read it out. For those reading at home, you can mute me if my voice you're sick of by now. But what we've got is you've gathered the courage to talk to a colleague about the fact that they feel that they pick on you. They seem to be keep telling you what to do, asking you why you're there, checking if things got done. They don't seem to do this to others, and you think it's bordering a bit on being a bully. At best, it's micromanaging, and you feel that you're a competent adult and shouldn't be watched over all the time. You believe in building relationships and making time for your colleagues and clients. You're passionate about a positive and friendly workplace culture. And the person you're going to talk to is often grumpy and you don't feel like they contribute to that. They just turn up and then they leave when the day is over. You think that everyone should contribute to the culture, and them not wanting to engage in the chat makes you feel like they dislike you. Right. So now you to you, all of these things are true. Right? And it seems easy to kind of go, well, this person's being a bully. They don't care about workplace culture. They're grumpy all the time. They tell me what to do. They're micromanaging. Clearly, they're a bad guy, right? Let's hear their perspective. Your colleague has asked you to have a chat on your lunch break. You like this person. They're friendly and they bring a bit of a positive atmosphere to work, but they also frustrate you a little bit because they always seem to be behind and you feel like you pick up the slack a lot. It might not bother you so much if they always looked busy, but you do see them chatting with others and standing at reception talking a lot. In your spare time, you train for the local roller derby competition with your close friends and feel a strong sense of community there. You often head there straight after work to get to training on time. Unfortunately, this vet, who is often running behind, tends to affect your list, and at the end of the day, sometimes it means that you don't get out the door when you hoped. You like them as a person and you try not to say anything too often because it's not your place, but you do find yourself offering reminders and small hints about the fact that they're getting behind. So, who's the bad guy here? No one is a bad guy here. If you are either of those people, it's really easy to believe that that other person is picking on you or just incompetent or just slow or lazy. You can come up with any number of reasons in your head why the other person is behaving how they are, but you haven't talked to them. The second character in this scenario doesn't value the workplace village like the second person does. And neither of those things are wrong or right. Her sense of community is from her sports team, and she feels like she's letting down her community because somebody at work is often behind. Whereas the person who's really engaged in the workplace culture and her role in that believes that the small talk and the having a chat and the being part of things and the knowing each other's personal stories, that is what she believes to be bringing her full self to work and contributing fully to her workplace. And she's not wrong. And you can see why just not having this conversation constructively and with genuine curiosity for another perspective and another worldview just leads to you both being annoyed all the time. So here's another one for you. Pretty valid. Yeah. Many of us can relate to that scenario. Fair. What do you reckon the other side of the story is? Clearly, nobody here is an asshole. The nurse has every right to be frustrated and upset by doing more work than is the standard interpretation of what nurses should do in this clinic, but the vet just didn't know. There's almost no way to undo that hurt, no matter how much you apologize afterwards. So both of these people are in the right, and both of these people aren't doing. That cause us frustration and resentment and really drag on our fulfillment and resilience. They're just a conversation away from not being that frustrating. It can be harder to move forward, but in a perfect world, if each of us commit to the best way for us to love our jobs and to not be so frustrated and resentful is to just talk to people, we're going to get a lot further.